It only takes one poorly informed developer to open up a possibility for SQL injection attack in your application. That would be really easy to do. I could go do it for you right now.
Welcome to Compromising Positions. I'm Leanne Potter, cyber anthropologist and head of security operations for a major retailer.
And I'm Jeff Watkins, a cybersecurity enthusiast and CTO for a major tech consultancy. Together, we're the award-winning tech podcast that asks non-cybersecurity professionals what we in the industry can do to make their lives easier.
And help make our organizations more prepared to face ever-changing human-centric cyber threats.
This episode, we're joined by Simon Painter, a senior software engineer with nearly 20 years of experience in the industry and author of the book Functional Programming with C#. In this episode, there's no perfect cybersecurity, but you could at least put a padlock on it. We look at how to get your first technical book published,
what devs really need from cybersecurity teams, and hint, it's probably more than you're giving them,
and what devs really think of security reviews.
We love this chat and we think you will do too, so sit back and enjoy our interview with Simon Painter. We have a very special guest with us today. We saw Simon when we were at WebDevCon, Jeff and I, and he was one of the closing keynote speakers, and it was fantastic. And I have to say, a highlight for me when I saw that at WebDevCon, and it was a very, very special topic, very close to my heart, which was movies centered around the tech industry. And it was a great history and analysis. And if it's ever available on YouTube, Simon, you've got to point me in the right direction because I want to share that with everyone. And I think you should be a mainstay feature on any tech conference because I really loved it and I still think about it ever since. I just think it was brilliant. And I have been watching some of the movies you recommend. But Simon doesn't just do that. Simon has a lot going on. So Simon is a senior software developer at Muller, and you've been in the industry for about 20 years. Is that right?
Give or take, yeah, thereabouts. Basically, I'm getting old.
Well, tell us a bit more about yourself. What does a day in the life look like for you?
Well, a good chunk of it involves running after children and shouting at them and getting them to behave because I have two Lillans. Day job mostly is coding. You know, I'm a software engineer. I spend the vast majority of my time just cracking code or bit of SQL or a C#. I'm a C# developer. That is predominantly my day job. I have a particular interest in functional programming. That's the thing I tend to talk about mostly. I've written a book on the subject, by the way, if anyone's interested.
Ooh, what's it called?
It's called Functional Programming with C#. I worked very hard on that title.
So it's a good title.
It does what it says on the tin, and it has. I got all excited when it was time to find out my animal, and before anyone asks, no, I get no say whatsoever. O'Reilly just give you an animal, and that is the animal. And they thought, well, he's British, we'll give him a coyote.
That makes sense.
It's as if you knew I was going to ask, because I always think, if I wrote a book for O'Reilly, what animal would I get, and do I get a choice? And I suspected maybe not, sir. But what would have been your choice if you got to pick?
Well, I did put a few suggestions in, and I was told you're probably not going to get them because it's just the way the system works. They have a secret cabal of animal choosers. That's my theory. Like when the time comes, they get a broom handler, bump the ceiling a few times, and an animal is lowered in a bucket. That's in my head. That's what happens. No, I would have preferred a Eurasian wren. They're one of my absolute favourite birds. Not only are they very cute and they're very common but also secretive. They're incredibly secretive creatures, so seeing a wren is something special. And also, according to old mythology, they are the king of the birds, and there's this whole story about the birds having a race to see who would be the king of the birds. And the wren won not because he was strong, but because he was clever. He hid in the beak of the eagle, and that meant that the wren passed the finish line before the eagle and won. And in fact, the German word for wren is Zaunkönig, which means fence king. So the king of the birds by brains rather than brawn, and I like that. That's kind of as tech in a way, isn't it?
I was just going to say that's very apt, especially for the type of book it was. But very exciting, though. O'Reilly, they don't do them any better than that when it comes to tech books.
They sent me an email, said, would you mind doing a book for us? And it took me less than a fraction of a second before I said, yeah, let's go.
And then you realise there's actually work involved in this.
You don't realise how much work it is, even though I had kind of the whole thing mapped out in my head, because what effectively it was a novelisation of several talks I'd done. In many ways. There's a lot more detail in there. It's not just that you're seeing my talks written down, but in principle, I knew how to structure it. I knew what I was going to say, but it's still such a lot of work. First off, it took me about a year to write it, and that was juggling around children and family and all the rest of it, and so I mostly worked on it between the hours of midnight and 3 a.m., which occasionally meant falling asleep next to my laptop because I just couldn't go on any longer. But after that's done, No, after that's done, there's about a year of editing.
Yeah, good
Wow.
grief.
Well, it's not quite a year, but it was getting on that way because there were something like 2 or 3 rounds of review by technical peers. So they
Mm.
and I had to go find those myself. Luckily, I do know some people.
Oh,
Thanks,
right.
guys, if
Okay.
you're
Okay.
listening.
For some reason, I just assumed that O'Reilly would have like a stable of technical people to kind of review that. But I guess that would be costly to keep them on staff.
I suppose I don't know, but they found a couple of people for me,
Mm.
but they said, "Would you go and find us?" So I found a whole load of people, and I advertised on Twitter. So if I ever write another book, I'll
Mhm.
probably do the same again. So do look
Mhm.
out for it, and you will get a free copy if you review it with me. All of their comments had to be taken into account, and then I had some more comments, and then after several rounds of tech review, then we went to the copy review, which is where they got a professional editor in. And then we're going all the way down to making sure all the punctuation is right and all the spelling is right and
Mm.
is the phrasing appropriate and of course I had to write the whole thing in American English, not British English. So it's mostly fine. I got quite used to remembering not to put a U in color and
Program. The word program. And you must have used that a lot.
yeah, I don't remember actually. The one that actually got me, and it was surprising. It turned out, according to O'Reilly, I mean, I don't know, but according to O'Reilly, there's no word in American English for mathematical working. As in, you're doing a maths exam and you're writing out your work. You've got instead of just putting the answer, at least in Britain, you write out your full working, don't
Yeah,
you?
yeah.
Each step of how you solve. We call it working, don't we? Well,
Yeah, yeah.
apparently, according to my editor, there is no word for that in American English, and she was saying you can't use that word. We don't know what that is. Okay, I mean, I don't know if that's universally true in America, or I don't know. I really don't, but that's what I was told. That's all I can say.
Listeners, yeah,
So,
American listeners, let us know in the comments if what word do
yeah,
you use?
I'd actually be
So
curious to know myself.
a book is a big deal. I'm always advocating that people always have something interesting to say in their field, like a perspective. Because one of the things that puts people off either from doing public speaking or writing blogs or, going to that very next level, which is, writing a book like you've done, is everyone said it all before. I've got nothing new to say, or what I have to say isn't worthwhile. What would you say to someone as like a tip for kind of getting that confidence to do? Because you do loads of public speaking, you blogs and writing and things like that. What would you say to someone who would come to you and say something like that?
There's a few things that occur to me. One is okay. One of the things one of the principles I always work to is that it's not about the information. It's not necessarily for one. It's not necessarily about bringing new information in. First is you're bringing a fresh perspective on the same information, but the second, at least when it comes to public speaking specifically, it's more that I'm giving information that you could look up if you wanted. I'm performing it. That's what I'm bringing to the table. Is I'm bringing you this information that if you wish to, you could go and look up at all the same books I did. But I'm bringing my interpretation of it, my show. This is my show that I'm doing, where I'm using whatever my particular idiosyncrasies to try and make it memorable and entertaining, in the hope that when you leave, at the end of the day, you walk out happy, but also having retained that information. And it helps that it's something I'm really interested about. So one of my presenting heroes is Michael Wood, the history documentary maker, because if you watch his programs, I mean, first off, they're interesting, but also he gives it so much passion. Like you could see that he's just excited talking about this. And
Makes all the
I
difference, doesn't it?
when it comes to public speaking, Michael Wood is my role model. So it's all about the passion and the interest. And so it doesn't matter if there are already books on this subject or already talks on this subject. They're not yours. They're not your one. And certainly, again, when I'm learning a topic, if it's a really hard one, I tend to read several books on it because no one person writes the one book that gets every aspect right. I might pick up 3 books on the subject, and like the first 15 things will be perfect in book 1, and there'll be 8 things that are just great in book 2, and then a couple of last little things didn't make sense to the other 2, but book 3 really makes it clear. So you sometimes need many sources with many perspectives to be able to really truly understand the subject. If you only follow one source of information, follow one master, you'll only ever not be quite as good as them.
Also, I find that, especially with tech books, there's also different ways of presenting. So I don't know if anybody's really read any of the grokking series now. Some of the AI algorithms and other types of computer science algorithms are quite mathematically dense, and just having a different style of presentation as well really, really helps.
It's strange how, I mean, I tend to put a lot of jokes in my presentations, and I find At least for me, I think that helps people stay awake, helps people keep engaged, because if nothing else, they're waiting for the next joke to come along. So even if they don't learn anything, at least they had a good time. And it doesn't even have to be a good joke, they just have to enjoy it. But the technical content of my talks tends to be quite heavy. And so I think you also need the levity to, it's like the sugar, was it the spoonful of sugar makes the medicine go down? It's like you have to have a little levity to help you digest the heavy technical ideas.
Spoonful of sugar helps the pure function go down.
Yeah, something like that. That's it. I think it does help. I think it does. If everyone at least walks out happy after my talk, then I'm a happy person. And I enjoy it. If nothing else, I'm having a great time.
And that's sometimes we just enjoy just being there and the energy of having presented something that we found interesting, even if it's a bit of an odd curio of a talk. Now, aside from being a famous author with O'Reilly, you also have kind of on topic with our podcast here. You do have a master's in InfoSec as well, don't you? Do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
I mean, I took it for a couple of reasons. One was it's a genuine subject of interest. I worked for a company called Proto Labs. They're an American company some years ago, and I got involved a little in security there, or at least having conversations, if nothing else, with the guy that was in charge of InfoSec there, Dave. Hello, Dave, if you're listening. And also, I was at a point where I was feeling like my career was in a little bit of a rut at one point. I thought, I've always had the idea that when you're in a rut, if your career's in a rut, then education's the way out. Start learning things. You don't know where it'll go, but just start learning. And eventually the rut will end, and I've got all this learning now that makes me hopefully better than I was before. So I thought, okay, what can I do? Where can I improve? How can I expand myself? Master's degree. And it has nothing to do with jealousy of my wife, who has something like 2 master's degrees. It really doesn't. And it was, I enjoyed it. I fundamentally enjoyed learning. So, it was a really interesting. It took me a couple of years, and it was a lot of work. It really is. When you're balancing it on top of a normal life, this is before the book, so it was the same sort of a deal. I was staying up late working on this thing. And at a master's degree level, it's not just a case of memorize the facts and regurgitate the facts. It's very much, you have to understand them, and you're going to write now this 2,000, 3,000 word essay on the subject, which is going to be passed over to an expert on the subject to assess whether you're talking absolute whatsits or not. The most fun course on the module was actually the forensics one. I really, really enjoyed that one.
Why did you enjoy it?
It's fun. I like a challenge. I like a puzzle, and the idea was fun. So they actually sent an evidence bag in the post. I studied with the Open University, so it was all distance learning. They sent an actual evidence bag in the post, and it had like a USB stick on it, and I had to operate under, like, I had to install some forensic software. I had to use, like, there's a note-taking system. I can't remember what it's called now, but it's one where it takes a hash of whatever note you made and all previous hash notes, so that they can have a degree of confidence that no one has altered these notes as you've gone along. You can put software in. You're actually really, in the real world, use hardware, like a hardware system where you can plug the USB in, and it's guaranteed that this USB interface has no write head on it, so that it's all about preserving the flow of the custody of the evidence, so that you can say with confidence no one's touched it. This famously was O.J. Simpson got let off. There was doubt over whether people had touched the evidence post collection or not. It's important. It is important. Now I had to use a software version because it's like, we're not going to go buy a great big hardware piece just for the university, but still, the principle applied. And I was told that there was a description of the crime that had been committed, and here was an image on the USB of the phone that the alleged perpetrator had used. And so I had to look in this phone image and try and find what evidence I could to support or repute the allegations against them. They were guilty, incidentally. But
that would make it an amazing, like, escape room type game.
Yeah. If I had infinite time, I've got all sorts of ideas of fun things I would do if I had infinite time. So many ideas. I'm Mr. Ideas. It's just having the time for it is the problem. But one of them is I would love to do a game where it's just this sort of thing. Not like, I mean, I liked games like Uplink and stuff like that, where it's kind of hacker simulations, but they're kind of fun hacker simulations where it's nothing like real computing. I'd go all the way, like actually make images of hard drives and things, and where people have to interact with realistically generated computer hardware. I would love that. The market for those games is probably like the 3 of us, but
have a load of fun. Wouldn't necessarily make us millionaires.
Oh, no, not in a million years, but goodness me, I'd have a great time making it, and then you too would probably enjoy playing it, and then that would be the end of
Really
the
would.
saga.
Mm. Yes, there's a sort of couple of follow-on questions, I think, because we have a lot of software engineers do listen to our podcast. Do you feel like having this master's has kind of helped your software development in some way? And do you think it's given you some good insights into dealing with the cyber teams?
Yeah, I mean, it has. Yeah, I mean, it gave me a lot of insights that hadn't occurred to me. I mean, I think everybody knows about infosec in terms of, I mean, we've all seen the films. That's what we'll be talking about that in a bit. We've all seen the films, and there's this image in Hollywood these days of like the hacker in the hoodie with the V mask and the black
Mhm.
background and the green text and all that sort of, which is nothing like what real hackers are like. But that's the image, and these super clever people and all this, and it's all about the guy trying to break into your network. And one
Simon,
of the
you're
things that
ruining the illusion. The
one of
audience
the
doesn't know that me and Jeff are sat there with hoodies on right now recording this and masks, full gear.
I mean, I'm too English and too polite to make a comment on it, but yeah. So I do actually have a V mask. I took it into the school. I do coding lessons at school, and I bring it in once to show them. The one thing that was a big revelation to me though was the idea that there is a lot to infosec beyond just folks trying to break into your network and steal your stuff. Like even the possibility of somebody pressing a button that deletes a whole load of records in a database, that's infosec.
Mm.
Internal problems, and they don't even have to be malicious. That was a big thing. Like infosec's not just malicious action; it's also someone did a stupid, or someone did a careless. It happens, and it's still infosec, isn't it? So that was fascinating. And ideas like non-repudiation. This had never occurred to me that was like another factor as well. It's not just about somebody destroying or deleting or stealing your data. You've also got the problem of being able to prove who did what and when, and that's still infosec.
That's
So,
huge in things like healthcare and banking.
oh, that.
Repudiation is massive.
I used to work for an outsourcing company, and of course, it's a big deal there to be able to track who did what and everything on the network because you don't own the network, you don't own the hardware, you don't own anything. You're just going to be custodians.
So, based on all that, I guess also your experience in the field of being a software engineer, what's been your experience with cybersecurity teams, apart from maybe your mate Dave who's listening? Have there been any challenges, and what's some of the good things you've found?
I mean, my experience has mostly for myself been that by and large in most organizations, they're kind of a little bit of a shadowy group that are off somewhere in the organization, and I'm not sure where, except when something goes wrong, in which case they suddenly all swoop down like Dementors. That's not entirely fair, but it is sad in a way. It would be nice to see more integration. I am a
Mm.
big fan of like the DevOps principle of everyone does a bit of everything, and we should have someone who's either a literal infosec engineer or at least someone with that expertise in the team who's there with the team.
Mm.
Yeah, we advocate for that a lot. I think a lot of our talks are around bringing security into the team, even if it's not a full-fledged, full-time security person, or at least having somebody who is looking after the security or getting shift left security, getting people involved earlier. Just having people turn up at the end and say, "Sorry, you're not going live," is not a very helpful engagement model. Thankfully, I think is starting to move into the past.
I mean, hopefully. I mean, there's definitely a lot more awareness. Certainly in my team here, we're putting a lot of effort into things like automated practices. I mean, that should be a no-brainer, really. Integrating automated checks. I mean, they're not all expensive. I mean, some of them are sure. There are free ones out there, and it's all better than nothing.
Mm.
Something is always better than nothing. And OWASP produced quite a lot of very good tools. I had fun once trying to rig up an automated pen testing thing in Azure pipelines. Didn't quite end up getting used, but I had a great day doing that. And I was doing things like standing up a database in a web app and then standing up. I can't remember if I used Zap or Burp Suite or something like that, and then just letting
Both
it
very
rip.
good
And
tools, yeah.
they're both very good tools. I do have a copy of Kali Linux at home as well on one of my Raspberry Pis, which I get out and just have a little play with every now and then. I think it would. I don't know if these exist, and maybe you could tell me, but it would be, I think, tremendously useful if there were more live-like play scenarios that you could have a go in, because I think you learn. I think you learn very much by playing and doing.
Mm.
Yeah, there's a really great organization called Immersive Labs, and they let you play around with malware in a really safe environment. I would absolutely love it if one day though that they would do like a community version of it. At the moment, it's licensing, and for most people, you can't buy it as an individual, and you have to buy it as an organization. I kind of get, because sometimes I think I have this kind of debate with myself: is wouldn't it be good if lots of people knew how to do this and then got interested into the industry, and then maybe we'd plug this so-called skills gap? But then again, on the other hand, I'm like, yeah, but then there'll be another side of a load of people we train up, and then they go and think I can earn more money actually being all with the bad guys. So I'm just like, oh, like how much do I encourage it or not? But then there's things like
Yeah, well,
Hackbox and things like that, and Try Hack Me.
I think I
They're
probably need
really
to
good tools.
investigate these. There was a time when I absolutely craved after getting involved in pen testing, but the only problem is there's not many roles of that going around here. I live in quite a quiet part of the country. There's not really a lot going on.
Yeah, well, not a lot of organizations have internal pen testers. Mostly you just hire them in, from other
Yeah.
companies. So most roles you're probably going to look at getting hired by a pen testing company. But also there is kind of like a limit as well when you're a pen tester of like your career growth. So it really depends where you actually want to be. If you want to be this junior pen tester, then pen tester, and senior, and then there's not very many kind of levels in there, so you have to kind of think carefully about what where you want your career to be as you're going through that, because it sounds very sexy pen testing, but it is a lot of report writing. So I think in cybersecurity, pen testing is everyone always comes up to me and says, Leanne, how to become a pen tester? And I'm like, this is what you do, but just bear in mind there is a lot of report writing and a lot of running of tools, like tools that you mentioned, basically, as well. The actual kind of hardcore penetration testing, that's a very small sliver of the organization.
Yeah, I did have conversation with pen testers we had in a previous organisation, and they very much said the same sort of a thing. They said actually the pen testing bit's really easy. The actual just having a go at bashing into the network and all the rest is pretty easy stuff.
Most organisations are pretty insecure, probably.
Yeah, I'm not going to mention any names, but I'm aware of problems.
I think one of the things that I'd encourage people to do, and I've done this on previous projects, you can't mark your own homework. It's always really good to have external people, but I'd encourage software developers to have a go at it. As long as you've got permission, don't go and try and hack your company's infrastructure without permission. But if you've got a system you've been building and you've got an environment and you can do some of your own pen testing, try it out, fool around and find out a little bit, use some of those tools that you mentioned earlier, but use some of the other tools as well, and have a go at a little bit of destructive testing on things. It's really fun, and you do usually find some big gotchas. And at the same time, you learn, and people often don't think like that. They go, "Oh, we've got a pen test." No, well, it probably doesn't hurt to do some of your own exploratory stuff first, use the right kind of tooling, and stop yourself from looking stupid when the pen test does arrive.
And I would echo that. Actually, doing a little bit up front, then as someone who gets in pen testers who they are very expensive. They cost thousands and thousands of pounds, like day rates. And there's nothing worse when a pen tester comes in and all they do is just say, hey, this is the ORS top 10 that you've hit. And actually, that's things on the ORS top 10, that should be kind of taken care of with either any existing code scanning tools you have, or if you can, like Jeff says, get people in and start playing around with that up front. Because I would rather pen testers look for interesting things rather than just the very basics. And that's always just so incredibly costly. But what has been your experience, Simon, when you've been working with security teams in your day job as a software developer?
Thanks again to Dave Rand. But when I was working with him, he was in the next office, and there was very much a direct presence of security. He was there. I could see him whenever I sat at my desk. And I used to listen to a lot of security podcasts back in those days. That was actually when I was working on my master's degree. So I was very deeply involved in all the news. There's a couple of podcasts I used to like. And so, we used to have regular conversations about stuff and ideas we'd had and things like that. But that was really nice. But most of the organizations I've worked in, when they've had, as I say, a security team, they've not really been very visible. Now, I don't know if that's everybody's experience or whether that's just I've been unlucky, but as in they've existed, but they tended to be involved at much higher levels of projects, like upward projects are being planned in the first place, and of course more involved with infra. I think they tend to focus most of their attention on infra problems rather than coding, which I'm down in the weeds at the maximum level of detail. So, but we're still rather, which is a shame because we are still rather a significant portion of the risk that exists. It only takes one poorly informed developer to open up a possibility for SQL injection attack in your application. That would be really easy to do. I could go do it for you right now. And you'd hope that most of us are clever enough not to do that sort of rubbish anymore, but I'm sure that we can all think of examples.
There's that old-fashioned InfoSec concept of trusted computer base, where you've been through and tested this particular amalgamation of operating system libraries and go, this is as secure as we need it to be. We know nothing that should stop this from proceeding. And then you're going to build software on top of it. And that means that you are then not moving away from that trusted computer base.
No, it's the computer equivalent of hacking holes in your wall and just expecting no one's going to try and jump through, because that's exactly what you're doing.
Do you think there's anything that cybersecurity teams could do to make your life easier as a software engineer?
I mean, probably visibility and advice would probably be a good one. I mean, I don't know about anyone else, but I value security reviews of my work from anyone. I value it. I don't get defensive if someone comes, looks at my code, and says, "Oh, that's not right," and that's not right. I'm quite happy to thank them to say, like, great, I can improve, I can learn from this, So I would love to get feedback when I'm doing my talks. I rarely do. I mean, generally everyone says that was lovely and that's nice, but I actually even like people to tell me if things weren't right. So same with security. I would say what would be hugely beneficial is if you did have security getting involved at some point with the code, even if it's once in a while, just have a look around or to give us advice or something, just to help move us along with. Because I mean, yeah, sure, the OWASP top 10, sure, I know those. You're probably not taking your job very seriously if you're not at least aware of OWASP top 10. But there's probably a lot of other ideas that we could have passed down to us from people with a deeper expertise in the field.
No, absolutely.
And do you think that's down to a misunderstanding about what your knowledge and expertise is when it comes to security as a software developer?
Sure. I mean, from the security team's perspective, I wouldn't wish to comment on the whys and the wherefores and so on. I wonder if it's, again, because there's this sort of idea that security is all about infra. That's the feel I get sometimes, at least. I mean, it is, don't get me wrong, 100%. Like, a lot of security problems are all infra-related. Absolutely true. The HTTP, you guys don't need me to tell you, the HTTP protocol and, like, network protocols are just shocking, just without a whole load of investment in time and effort and probably a load of Cisco hardware and all the rest of it to kind of harden up your network. So it is important. You have to do these things, otherwise you're just wide open to attack. Like you say, the application, it's poking holes in your walls, so you need to firm those up as well. Otherwise you've wasted all of that lovely time you've spent firming your network up, because all they'll do is just go straight to the web application and see what they can do with it.
Absolutely.
That, or you're giving far too much. I mean, like I said, I was saying earlier, it's not just about attackers. It could also be that just you've really designed this thing so that everyone has got God-level access to this database that's critical to the business. What on earth are you playing at, guys? That sort of thing is worth monitoring as well.
Well, one of my colleagues got a rude awakening from, it was a bank, and I'm not going to name who he is or who the bank was. Got a tap on the shoulder saying, "Is this Mr. M. Mouse who's just appeared in a live account that seems to have come from your workstation? Did you intend to create that?" It's like, oh, I thought I was connecting to the test environment. So it really does happen.
I once heard a hilarious story on the Register, and it was about a mail merge that had gone wrong. Supposedly, I mean, I read it on the Register, so take it as a thing I read. But there was some mail merge that was happening with, they were sending out letters to some insurance companies' customers who were particularly wealthy, and as a stopgap, they'd put in the first couple of words were "Dear Rich," and then there was an unfortunately rude word next. And they didn't take out the default text when they actually sent it out.
That is a classy one.
When we had this initial discussion, you said the more prominent you are, the more tempting you are, and there's no perfect security. But what does good enough look like? And how do we get there? In collaboration with someone like yourself.
Yeah, I mean, the way I've always thought of security was like putting a padlock on your bike. If a crook's looking around for a bike to steal and they see a bike with no padlock on, well, they'll have that one. It's easy. If there's two bikes and one's got a teeny little padlock that they could pull off and the other's got a dirty great thing that you need bolt cutters for, well, they'll probably take the little one. The way I think of security is it's not about perfect security. You can't, like you say, you can't have perfect security. There's always going to be something somewhere. There'll have been a compromise made somewhere because we're at 99% secure and the next level up would cost more than the amount the company makes in a year or something like that. But what you can do is make yourself less tempting than the next guy. The impression I get, rightly or wrongly, is that the majority of people who are trying to break into your network, into your computer system, into whatever, they're not these super brilliant enemy agents from foreign hostile powers who have unlimited godlike knowledge of computers and all the rest of it. Most of them are just kids who are just doing the computer equivalent to going and smashing all the bins on a Saturday night. And if your computer system's too much trouble, they'll just give up and go home. But if the next dairy company down the road, if they've got no security, well, guess who they're going to have some fun with?
Well, with you there, I guess you could say nobody puts Muller in the fruit corner.
Oh.
Sorry.
Oh, that hurt. That really hurt.
Well, Before we move on to a very special next segment, we do ask the hard-hitting questions here on compromising positions. So bear in mind, you work for Muller. Is it fruit, flakes, or chocolate? What is your preference
I
in
like the
terms of the
Greek
corner?
style. Yeah, actually, I like the Greek
Oh,
style. I like the Greek
you're
style. It's
going,
really nice.
you're going for the new lines. Oh, very interesting. I do like the Sicilian lemony ones.
It's nice, isn't it? There's something about the really thick texture. It's like almost mousse-like, and I quite like that. So, yeah, if I'm going for a Muller yogurt, it tends to be one of them. Allegedly, I'll be getting some free yogurts one day, but I've been here 4 years and I'm yet to see them. I'll probably be leaving one day, and then finally they'll say, "Oh, by the way, here you go."
and not a single one of the Greek yogurt ones that'll be gutting.
Probably, I don't actually like fruit, and that's an awful thing to admit. I try and find ways to get fruit in. It's something about the texture that I don't like. It's sort of
No, I'm
squidgy
with
and
you on that.
sweet, and so I tend to eat bear yo-yos and things because at least it's fruit. It's just a texture that I can eat.
Yeah, like Jeff just said then. Yeah, he's not too keen either. Not.
Who's there?
The cybersecurity team.
The cybersecurity team who?
Exactly, my friend. The cybersecurity team who? Why are we not more present? Seems to be a very common complaint.
Well, maybe there's just not enough of you to go around, I guess.
I get that, but I can't help hear Simon's words echo out about us being very focused on infra rather than code. So dear listeners, when was the last time you did a code review? This week? This month? This year? It might be time to start getting in touch with your engineering team.
Agreed. Well, let's hope they're all as receptive as Simon is. Speaking of which, he's back with us next week, isn't he?
Aye, he is, for our season finale, a very special episode.
We had an absolute blast recording it.
Yeah, we really did. So far, that episode, we're going to talk about one thing that you and I are very interested in.
AI?
No, we've done that to death. Our other passion, films! Specifically, we're going to have a wonderful discussion with Simon about hacker films. The good, the bad, the downright ugly. Who am I? Someone who's watched a lot of films portraying cybersecurity.
Well, I can't wait for this discussion. Expect war games, the net, sneakers, and many, many more. Get out the popcorn because you'll not want to miss this.
Hack the planet!
Well, yes. In the meantime, links to everything Simon discussed in this episode can be found on the show notes. And if you like the show, please do leave us a review and a share on LinkedIn or in your teams. It really helps us appease the algorithm gods and helps us spread important insights like Simon gave us today.
We hope you enjoyed this episode. See you next time. Keep secure and don't forget to ask yourself, am I the compromising position here?